I'm Phil Walker. I'm with the Walker Collaborative. I got most of our consulting team here. Keith Covington is to the right here. Keith is an architect, urban designer, and planner. Liesl Gothert is right here. She is a transportation planner and traffic engineer? No, transportation planner. You work with a lot of traffic engineers. But most importantly, she's a Tullahoma native. She went to high school. This has got to bring back memories, right? And Randall Gross. Randy is our economist and strategic planner. So, and you can see up here the steering committee members. Any steering committee members here, if you could raise your hand, that would be great. All right. And of course, Winston, I think everybody knows where's Winston, and Mary. Great staff. Speak up. Yeah, we're competing with them. Oh, okay, I can do that. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of the who's who so far. And here's what yes, sir.
Question real quick.
Sure.
On those.
Yeah.
Are those volunteers or are they paid consultants to the city?
So the consultants, we're paid.
Okay, so the ones on the left, the consultants, all of those are paid by the city?
Paid by the city.
Okay, yeah. And the key city staff on the right?
Oh, wait a second, I'm hearing a no. Is there some technical?
Consultants, and then the committee is not.
No, yeah, the committee's not paid. They're citizens, volunteers, right.
No, I understand that, but
okay.
I'm saying the consultants that are on
right.
Those
Yeah.
are paid for by the city.
They are, yeah.
And the one on the right are within the city of Tullahoma?
The,
Staff, those are paid.
the staff are paid employees, yeah,
Okay.
other employees of the
Thank
city.
you for
Yeah, sure.
that up.
So here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to give you a little bit of background. Who all's been to one or more of these meetings so far? Okay. Well, that's good because we don't go over a lot of old ground we've already plowed. We're trying to hit on newer stuff. But anyway, but for those of you who've not been to anything yet, a little bit of background on the project. We're going to talk about our key findings, but in a very abbreviated format. In fact, we're really just going to tell you, here's what we've already told you, and we're going to focus more on the new stuff that you haven't had presented. Then we're going to talk about the public input results, particularly the public opinion survey. If you remember the online, for those of you, and by the way, there were like 1,500 people, more than that took that survey, which is amazing. I mean, I couldn't believe it. We've worked in comparable, in fact, we're working in a town that's got almost the same population, and their results were about 400, I think. So kudos to you, that's incredible. But anyway, I'll go over that later. Then we'll talk about the planning principles, and the principles are really important because when we turn you loose to do your plans, and when you break up into teams, those are kind of things you want to think about, just kind of broad concepts that everybody kind of seems to be agreeing on so far. And then, so we'll do the planning exercise, which will be really most of tonight. I mean, that'll probably be about an hour for those of you who can stay that long. And then at the end of it, we'll have each team, one or two folks in each team of volunteers who are coming up with plans, present their key ideas in about a 5-minute period. So that's it, and that's what we'll be doing tonight. So in case you've not heard it yet, what a comprehensive plan is, it is a roadmap for the future growth and preservation for those areas of your community. So it deals with a lot of different issues, land use and development and economic development and mobility, that is transportation, housing, natural environment and historic resources, all those sorts of things. Basically, if you drive around town, everything you can see will be touched on somehow by this plan. And there are 4 key questions that a good plan should answer. Number one, where are we now? That's all the background research on kind of a snapshot of the community. Where are we headed? That is, what are the trends, whether it's development or economically, whatever. Where do you want to go? And that's all this public input we've been doing. What is your vision? And then how do we get there? That's the technical part of the plan that takes your vision that you've communicated to us over the last several months, and it's figuring out how do you achieve that vision. So that's what a comprehensive plan is. And so why do you prepare one? One is to build consensus, particularly among the development community, but just the community in general. It's the basis for your zoning. Zoning isn't there just to make people follow a bunch of regulations. Zoning is this one key tool to implement a plan. So there's a good chance that once we do the plan, you'll revisit your zoning, and we'll have specific recommendations in the plan on what might be revised with zoning. Number 3, to secure funding for projects. You know, this community goes after grant money all the time, and it has a lot of success, by the way. But if you want to be competitive with other communities that you're going up against to get that money, it really, really helps to have a new comprehensive plan, and then you can tie that project that you're trying to get funding for into the plan. That's always going to get you more points when you're competing with other communities for grant money. To enhance the quality of life, both for the citizens, which is the most important thing, and for economic development. You know, when businesses are thinking about moving a company, you know, they look at all sorts of quality of life issues. You know, how vibrant is your downtown? How many miles of greenway or bike trails do you have? All those sorts of things that kind of check off boxes. So that's another reason that enhancing quality of life is important. And then finally, for fiscal efficiency, so that your spending can be very targeted and tied to an overall plan. So where are we now? This is a 5-step process. We've already done task 1, the project kickoff and background research. Task 2, the visioning. That's all these different public meetings. And I'm going to kind of review for you a little later all the different public input that we've had so far. And Randy did his economic assessment and analysis. He'll be presenting that a little bit later. Here we are with the Charrette. The Charrette is a 5-day process. This is the first day, the public workshop. After this is like a starting gun for us. It's kind of like running a marathon. and you have till Monday night to present the concept plan. I mean, we're not even going back to Nashville, at least Keith and I, over the weekend. It's like around the clock, basically working so that Monday evening we present the concept plan. Back here at the high school in the auditorium, that's it, auditorium. So anyway, that's what this task is. And then once we get your feedback on the concept plan, we'll go back and put the plan document together. It'll reflect the feedback we got, and then we'll the city will probably post a draft of the plan on their website, let everybody look at it in detail. Then we come back and present it, this detailed plan, get more feedback, and revise it again. So that's kind of the whole process. So on the key findings, first of all, I just want to kind of tell you what we told you already without, you know, having to go through all of it again. The last time we met or in all of our meetings, we talked about the history of the community, which is very rich, as you know. We talked about the natural environment, things like topography and forested areas and water resources. These are all things that we've mapped and we'll describe in the background section of the plan document. We talked about the built environment, like existing land uses and mobility and utilities. We talked about public policy, like your last comprehensive plan, which was in 2011, your zoning. Randy's presented a lot of stuff already on socioeconomics. And now for the new stuff. And by the way, we were very familiar, of course, with the fact that you had an urban growth boundary. We just hadn't presented anything on it. So I do want to just mention that because this is one of the issues that we'll look at. You know, back in 1998, as some of you may already know, the state of Tennessee passed this legislation that requires counties to plan and come up with these urban growth boundaries that they might expand into in the future. And so no city can annex territory in another urban growth boundary. And this map up here, I was thinking I had my, aha. So this map, I don't know how well you can see it, especially in the back, but so this kind of pinkish area up here and here is the urban growth boundary. This gray area is the current city boundaries now. And the city has been granted by Coffee County and Franklin County to apply subdivision regulations and planning commission review. So they can do that in these growth boundary areas, but the counties have not granted the city zoning regulation authority, okay? So that's kind of where that, so one thing we'll look at is, does that boundary need to change in any way, those two urban growth boundaries? Yes, sir?
Is there attempt for the city of Tullahoma in the future to take those urban boundaries that you've identified there to become city of Tullahoma?
Well, I mean,
incorporated within the city of Tullahoma? Is that the plan?
Well, there is no plan yet. I mean, we don't have a plan yet. We're just saying that we will address it, though. And I have no idea what the answer is at this point, to be honest.
Excuse me?
Oh, they changed the laws so that you can only annex from a willing property owner. Yeah,
It
yeah.
has to be a property owner that
Yeah.
initiates the.
Unless you
Right.
declare eminent domain.
No, they can't do that. No, that's a different issue, really. Yeah, yeah. But good question. Okay. The other thing that we did that you haven't seen yet, we did a future build-out scenario. And so what is that? Well, the purpose of that is to look at your current zoning and say, what happens if the whole town, within your current boundaries, that is, developed out? You know, because a lot of the area isn't developed, obviously, right? So what would that look like? Now, I want to warn you, this is very theoretical. It's really almost more of an academic exercise because Randy's going to talk about real-world realities as far as actual market demand over the next 5 or 10 years. But it's still interesting, it's instructive, I think, to say, okay, if you were to build out your whole city with the current zoning, what does that look like, right? So here's what we did. The first thing you do is you figure out, well, what's our current population, how many households, average residents per household. So the current population is a little over 20,000. That's a little over 8,000 households. When you divide the households into the population, that tells you there are 2.51 people per household on average. That's important because when we make these projections, you know, that's the number we're going to use. So then Keith here puts together a map, and the areas that are kind of bluish or gray, I guess, are areas that are substantially developed. The areas that are undeveloped or sort of underdeveloped, we've got the zoning colors there, right? So like, for example, the broadest area is R1. This area in here that you're seeing, that's the R1 zone. I'm going to use that as an example when I make your eyes glaze when you see this chart. So that's why I pointed that out, because I won't put you through the pain of all this, but I want to just show you how we kind of arrived at these numbers, right? So let's take the R1. So there are right now close to 8,000 acres of R1 land. Of that, 3,500 acres are undeveloped or underdeveloped, right? So that's about 45% of the R1 land. So if you multiplied that number by 0.85, you're taking out about 15% of the land area for right-of-way if you're to develop it, right? That's a very rough number, but it, you know, good enough for what we're doing here. And then you figure out, well, how many units, housing units per acre can you do with that R1 zoning? Well, it happens to be 3.63 units per acre. So you multiply, you know, that number by that number and you get that number. In other words, in the R1, you could build nearly 11,000 units just in the R1, okay? So let me give you the results are the existing housing units. When you add them all up, it's close to 9,000 units. New housing, the existing housing, that's close to 9,000. New housing units would be 14,500, and then total units, you know, in the whole community would be about 23,399. So let me show you this last.
New housing?
Well, some of it is and some of it isn't. So like existing housing is this number of units.
Okay.
New housing's that number, the 14, that's the total, okay?
So if you take the 14.5
Uh-huh.
and multiply it by the 2.51.
Right, we're gonna get there.
You're talking over 30,000 people.
Right, so here we go. Here's that equation. So currently you have 8,823 residential units with a population of 20 plus. Potential new units would be 36,500, more people, right? If you combine that existing and the potential, you'd get that many units or a population of 58,731 residents, which is nearly 3 times your current population. Again, this is very theoretical. Right. Randy will talk reality in a second, but that's just, you know, if you built out, that's what it would look like, right? So if you look at what, and Randy's going to talk about this in a few minutes, if you look at future market demand, the projections through just 2026, not forever, but 2026, is somewhere between 450 and 900 housing units of various types, which would result in a new population of anywhere from a little over 1,000 to a little over 2,000 new residents, okay? Big difference than this kind of build-out thing, right? So the bottom line conclusion is that you've got a lot more residentially zoned land that you would ever conceivably need. That's not unusual, by the way, for a community. I mean, you got to zone stuff something, right? And so, but it just goes to show there's plenty of land for that. Yes, sir.
Did you do any analysis between 2000 and 2020 to compare your statistics between 2000 and 2020, the population growth within Tullahoma, and now from 2020 to 2040 to verify if any of your key findings are relevant or not.
I don't know if that, we didn't do growth projections, our population projections weren't part of the
That's
scope.
what you just
I
did.
did as part of the market. But not
Well-
really.
You just did growth populations.
Well, yeah, but that was based on zoning, which is not realistic. Yeah, so I mean,
Well, my question is, in order to do a hypothesis and then determine whether your hypothesis is correct or not, would be to look at from 2000 to 2020, say what was the growth in the city between 2000 and 2020,
yeah.
and say, is that anywhere relevant to what we're doing from 2020 to 2040? And if you don't do the first one, you can't prove your second hypothesis.
Well, we're not trying to prove anything, to be quite honest, so, sorry.
You're putting numbers out here that says this is what you're projecting over the next 20 years.
No, we're not. We're not at all. Look at this, important. This is theoretical and not market-based.
Okay.
He'll talk about that. Yeah, so it's just an exercise to show if you were to build out based on the highest density you could do, here's what it would be. That's all it is, okay? Sorry if there's any confusion on that. But thank you. Okay, now we will get to reality, and that'll be Randy, and I'm going to unclip this thing. And
Through this? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Hello again. I'm Randy Gross. I'm an economic and strategic planning consultant. And when we first started working on the comprehensive plan, we were looking at what are the key issues that need to be addressed in terms of some of the economic questions. So there was some baseline analysis that we presented last time I think we saw you. But one of the key questions that the city asked is really, and that you asked through our community meetings, was sort of the housing question of how much housing do we need, what kinds of housing do we need, and moving forward, how do we get the kinds of housing that the community does want and does need. So part of what we've done is a housing market analysis, and that is really looking at what the potential is for Tullahoma over the next 5 to 7 or 8 years in terms of housing development potential. So part of that was looking at past trends. Part of that was looking at demographic projections and other projections of how much demand there is, not in Tullahoma, but in your market area and the sources of your market. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of that, and then I'll have some other things to talk about. One of the things I wanted to point out was the existing factors impacting on your market. Currently, you have a very tight supply of housing, and this is not uncommon to Tullahoma, and it's fairly common throughout the United States right now. There have only been about 60 or so single-family units permitted each year in the city by, in terms of building permits, and only 2 multifamily units per year. That's an average. Obviously, 2 units is not multifamily, but on average, if you look at the last 30 years or so, 2 units per year is not a lot of multifamily housing or apartment-style housing. So supply has been increasing, but fairly slowly, about 7% total since 2010. Meanwhile, there's been growing demand. Households, the number of households in the market area is up by 10% or 14%. And then there's been a pandemic effect. I don't know if you've witnessed this, but people moving to the area, in southern Middle Tennessee to get away from the coasts, to get away from other places, and they're coming here during the pandemic. And then there are also growing numbers of people who are generating demand and change in the market, like first-time buyers who just can't find the housing that they can afford in the market, or people who are empty nesters and moving up, like I'm getting to be almost that age, where we're looking to move down in the market. So, and the baby boomers are still driving a lot of the housing demand in the United States. So these are major shifts in the housing market. At the same time, there's been rising prices in terms of rents, in terms of sales prices, and all price ranges. And the table on the right, or the chart on the right, I don't know if you can see it very well, because the color came out kind of odd here. But this line across here is the sale price, the average sale price And you can see there's been a steady increase there since 2015. This line down here, the dotted line, is the other important line, and that is the number of days that a house stays on the market on average. And as you can see, from 2015, it was 48 days in the Tullahoma market was the average number of days a house would stay on the market before it sold. Now it's down to 4. So that means supply is just not there, and yet demand has been growing. So that's the result of that sort of trend.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Go to the next one, if you could back up,
Uh-huh.
please. So if I assume your high supply of 60 family units permitted each year, up 7% since 2010, assuming we take 2020 numbers, okay? You're saying that there's 600 family units that have been permitted between 2010 and 2020?
About that, yeah.
600 family units. Okay.
Single family units.
Yeah, single family units. Okay.
So looking forward, and there was an analysis done to really forecast the potentials, the demand going into the future. And this was based on demographic projections in the market area, the broader market area, amongst different demographic groups, ages, age cohorts. As we age, the population's aging, et cetera. And there's going to be demand for for-sale housing of about another 500 or so units in the next 5 years. So that's almost twice as much growth as you've seen over 10 years. And then market rate, about 300 of those units. So some of those units are going to be, there's going to be a need for housing for people that don't have the area median income. They might fall below the area's median income, but they certainly have a need for housing. A lot of the housing units are for people who are working people who just are not making the salaries required to afford the housing that is coming out on the market. That's another 120 units. And the demand is across all price ranges. So, you know, the $100,000 range, which no one's building houses for that right now in Tullahoma, about 120 units. The $200,000 range, the $300,000 range. So across all of those ranges, you'll see demand. The market is supplying housing in the $300,000, $350,000 range right now. So you are getting housing for this group right here, but not for these two groups. So there's a lack of supply of housing under $300,000, $350,000.
Excuse me, a question. to go
Yes,
with
sir.
that. It's probably part of your background.
Uh-huh.
Do you have information on what the projected growth of different income demographics are?
Yeah.
That would go along with this?
Yes, that was what fed into this. But again, it's for the whole market area. So Tullahoma draws from not just within the city limits of Tullahoma, but people who are moving in and out, people moving up and down. So there are different categories of people. But yes, that's what went into this.
I don't want to steal your thunder in any
Okay.
slides. Have you done an analysis of the number that are moving out compared to the number that are moving in?
Yes.
Okay.
So the demographic projections account for people moving, the net growth. It's the net, yeah, including people who are passing away and people being born. And so the natural increase as well as the relocations. On the rental housing side, so again, there's demand for about 220 to 400 rental units. Now keep in mind, how many multifamily units have you been building every year? 2 on average. Oh wow, is that, thank you. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
A lot better, okay. Thank you. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Market rate of those about 200, and workforce housing about 200 units. Again, workforce housing is for people that may not be able to afford the current market rate housing that's being supplied. Again, all price ranges. And here the market's not even supplying the upper end of the rental market. Now, who are these people? Are they haggards, people who just don't want to live in a house and they just are begging for? No, these are local graduates, your local high school graduates, people moving up, people relocating here and in transition, so they haven't bought a house yet, they're renting before they buy something. Singles who may not need or can't afford, a whole house to take care of. People in change of life situations, divorcees, recently, someone has passed away, whatever. Empty nesters, students, for example, at UT, and different places, at Motlow State, and local service workers who may not be able to afford or really can't maintain a house and property and all of that. So there's a lot of different groups that this comprises. And that's what we call, the group that is a target for workforce housing. Any questions on that? In addition to the housing market analysis, there was a question that the city and that you had in our previous meetings about event space. There was a need seen for the city to have a place where the community can come together for different kinds of events, but also an interior space for events, for meetings that could be here in Tullahoma, where you wouldn't have to go somewhere else. Can you hear me still? Okay. Where you wouldn't have to go somewhere else for a meeting. So I did conduct an event venue market analysis looking at the potentials for that as well. So among the things that I looked at in terms of your existing competitiveness for this types of facilities include your central location. One of the negatives is the lack of an interstate highway, lack of interstate access, because if you're bringing people here for a meeting and you don't have interstate access, it makes it harder to get people to come in. A lot of meeting planners need that kind of access. Branding, you have great branding opportunities in terms of the aerospace, the aviation industries, the whiskey trail, etc. There are a lot of competitive venues in the area with a total capacity of almost 4,000. When I say the area, I mean Tullahoma, Manchester, Cowan has a facility, and of course there are a number of them in Murfreesboro. Some of the assets you have, AEDC, the distilleries, downtown, and of course a lot of your natural areas, museums, etc. And then you have, I had to look at things like the condition of your downtown and the various sites and opportunities of where this could occur. Downtown is probably one of the best locations for a meeting venue because then you can generate spin-off activity to small businesses and restaurants and such in the downtown and have an impact on revitalization of downtown. And also people who are coming for meetings, especially if it's an overnight meeting, they want a place to eat out and things like that. And then also you have these great lakes and natural areas which also provide an opportunity for meeting space or meeting venues potentially. So those are two different types of opportunities. So there were a number of different types of user groups that I looked at. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, back on your key point. That's okay, you can leave that one up.
Oh.
Did you look at the Tullahoma Airport Authority at all? I mean,
Yeah.
we have Bonnaroo every year.
Yeah.
And there's 100,000 people that come into this
Right.
area.
Right.
And you look out at the Tullahoma Airport and Bonnaroo, there's at least 25 to 30 private jets sitting out there that we haven't even tapped into.
Right, right. The airport was definitely one of the, it's not mentioned on here, but it's definitely one of the assets that I considered as part of that, yeah. So then there were different potential user groups that I looked at, and there was a survey completed. I don't know if, did any of you or your organizations take the survey or see this? You did? Okay, a few of you. All right. There was a survey of organizations, some of them in Tullahoma, but others were statewide organizations to see if there was any interest among state associations that may rotate meetings between West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, East Tennessee, and look for different locations in the state to meet. So there were about 65 to 70 of those organizations surveyed. There were also government agencies that were, there were more than that survey. Those are the numbers who actually generated meetings. There were government agencies surveyed, institutions, different kinds of companies, including some of the companies that are located here, and then also weddings and other types of social events. So they form part of the meeting market. And there were a total of about 64 meetings that could be generated from that market in Tullahoma.
A question on that. Did we do a comparative analysis to go back and look at the Coffee County Convention Center and the data that was used to justify that versus reality and balance that against this.
So I did look at that conference center from a competitive perspective. I didn't look at the original feasibility study for it, but I did look at what they have, yes.
I'm trying to validate the analysis that goes into the study.
Right. So I'm still getting there. So give me another minute. So there were the.
When you did your analysis of government buildings, for instance, in downtown, there's a post office building that's been sitting empty for 4 years. Nobody's taken advantage of that. The city didn't want to do anything with it. Okay, but yet we're looking at other issues here.
Okay.
Because I was looking into how to use that building as a nonprofit agency, and the answer I got was the only person that could do anything with it is the city of Tullahoma.
Okay. Well, that's
It has to be a city agency to buy that from the federal
Okay,
government.
well, we'll have to talk about that later when we talk about specific sites and buildings, but I'm not
Okay.
there yet. So just going back to this slide, this 64 number that I talked about before is the associations, that's the total, about 60 associations and organizations. There was a separate analysis that I did looking at corporate meeting potentials. There's a total of about 57 meetings, and that includes board and executive meetings, sales and marketing meetings, retreats, very few of those, and other types of meetings. And then there was also the wedding market. So I looked at these separately through different types of analysis to determine what the potentials were. The total potential with a capacity of about 500 is a facility that could accommodate about 6,000 to 8,000 square feet. And the primary uses, based on the survey information, based on the demographic analysis of these different organizations and the economic projections, is for fundraisers and social events. Got another cord coming through? Fundraisers and social events, annual meetings, sales and marketing, board meetings, training sessions, and workshops. Now, this is just the market opportunities, the market potentials. You gonna unplug me?
We're just trying to make it work.
Okay. This is just the market opportunities. It's not the financial feasibility. Does that work?
It's fine.
What? Do what?
We're gonna fix just the math.
Sorry. So this looked at the market potentials and suggests that there is an opportunity here in terms of the market. Now, there are a couple of caveats. As you mentioned before, sir, this was not a feasibility study. This was a market study. So the next step would really be to look at the viability of this from a financial sustainability perspective to determine whether it's even financially sustainable. And that would mean looking at, plugging in these numbers and determining what they can generate in terms of revenue, and then what kind of space would be required in terms of the cost of maintaining that space. The second caveat is this would require a co-branding type of arrangement. So my feeling is that in and of itself, it would be difficult to capture this market. But if it were co-branded with AEDC, with a local institution, with another local venue, for example, it would have a better opportunity to maximize that market. Does that make sense to you? So I think there's a co-branding opportunity here. Just in and of itself as a Tullahoma meeting space, it's going to be difficult to make that work. But if it's co-branded with an institution, a local employer institution, other user, it would have a much better chance. The third caveat is that if it were located, for example, downtown, you have to create the environment that can support such a venue. Because one of the reasons that you'd be able to capture those meetings and other, especially the corporate meetings and such, is that you have a place that people would want to come to in terms of the aesthetics of the environment, in terms of the meeting space itself, in terms of restaurants and amenities that would be offered as part of that packaging. And the same with a lakefront type of environment. It would have to have, scenic vistas and perhaps recreation amenities and that sort of thing to package with it. So there are a lot of caveats to making this work, but it is a first sort of check on the question that does say that there is some potential for a small-ish or moderate-sized sort of meeting venue if you have the right co-branding and you have the right amenities to go with it. Okay, moving on. Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, I got to get your mic.
Oh.
Okay, so when Randy was talking, I could hear his voice kind of go in and out. Did y'all experience that? So I'm going to put y'all in charge of, if I'm not going out, I'll keep using this. Otherwise, you know, I'd yell loud. I don't want to yell into the mic, but if it cuts off. Anyway, we'll see how this goes. It's going in and out. Tell you what, I'll just talk loudly. How's that? Is that going to work? If we can turn that off. Yeah, because it's kind of, you know, otherwise it's just going to be tough. So this just shows you all the meetings that we've done so far. You know, back in July, we had the initial public kickoff meeting. In August, we did a series of stakeholder group meetings with different groups of people, entities and so forth. We did these 4 different area-wide meetings that were kind of, the beauty of, among many good things about Tullahoma, is the quadrant system, you know, this northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest. So we had meetings in the different elementary schools, had great attendance at those. One more time? Oh, okay. Maybe the untangling of the cord helped. We'll see. Static, yeah. Still going in and out? Yeah, there it goes. Okay. Oh, well, it's all right. I'll just talk real loudly. So the public opinion survey, and I'm sure almost everybody, if not everybody here, took it because it was amazing that you had 1,157 respondents. It's way more than in most communities your size, which is awesome. So what we did, you know, this is just one, it's important to emphasize, this is just one way of getting public input. There are a lot of other ways. We had meetings and so forth, but this is always kind of interesting. It took roughly an average of 9 minutes for most folks. It was anonymous. We did have some demographic questions just to get a sense of, just to make sure it wasn't all loaded towards one, you know, real specific demographic. It ran from early August through the 1st of November. You can kind of see the trend. You know, it started off, most people took it early on. It must have been a big marketing push in October. Yeah, because it really jumped up there. But anyway, great results as far as that. And what I want to show you, these are just some random examples because the full results are going to be in the appendix section of the plan. But I just want to run through a few of these because I think it's sort of interesting stuff. Number one, how would you describe the overall quality of life for you as a Tullahoma resident? For example, your housing, job opportunities, education, a vibrant downtown, availability of goods and services, parks, recreation, and open space. So when asked that question, the majority of people said it has, or the highest rated of the 3 choices, it has stayed about the same. So things haven't changed a whole lot in most opinions. Then there was another pretty large percent that says it is actually improving. And then as far as it is getting worse, I mean, that looks like about 15% of all people thought it was getting worse. So that's a pretty good sign. So number 2, how would you rank the importance of the following issues for Tullahoma? And 1 being the most important, 7 the least. So the number 1 issue was economic development and job creation. That's that green bar, followed by education, followed by housing condition and choice of housing types. The Survey Monkey, when they give you the results, it kind of cuts off the full answer, but our option. But anyway, that's what that was. It wasn't just about condition, it was also about options. Followed by parks and recreation, and then downtown revitalization, and mobility for motorized vehicles, and then mobility for non-motorized. Question 4, what types?
Could you back up?
Okay.
One slide, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Did you do any analysis of when I look at that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, the majority of everybody that answered is somewhere around a 5 or a 5.5. If I look at the first 3.
Uh-huh.
Did you look at any reasons why we didn't have anything up at 9 or 10, or
Yeah, you know, the way a survey like this works, you really can't figure that out. I mean, you wouldn't be able to, you just have to be guessing. Yeah, and he was wondering, anyway, it's real, the way they set it up, it's pretty simple. You know, you just have multiple choices and you kind of go with whatever the results are. But good question. What types of housing, this is question 4, what types of housing do we need more of in Tullahoma? So the number 1 choice over here in green was single family houses, followed closely by all of the above, which is over here, followed by townhouses, and then multifamily, and then duplexes, quadplexes, and triplexes. So that was kind of the order on that. Number 5, please rank the following needs for downtown. So the highest voted thing, so to speak, was more and or improved dining, followed by a public gathering space for events, followed by more available and convenient parking. Then it looks like next was improved aesthetics and improved walkability, and then preservation and enhancement of historic buildings, and then housing. Question 8, this was specifically about Jackson Street, and the question is, if this thoroughfare and adjacent lands were to be physically improved, what types of specific improvements would you like to see? So the top choice was expanded sidewalk system, followed by more landscaping, including street trees, followed by more pedestrian crosswalks, and then it looks like additional street lights, and then it looks like fewer or no billboards, smaller and fewer signs, and then like none of the above. This is kind of interesting. Buildings built closer to the street. Now that got a really low rating, and I think that's our planner bias. You know, a lot of times with planners, we look at these kind of commercial corridors, and when you have buildings that sit way back, what do you have between the road and the building? Parking lots, right? So, you know, a lot of kind of these strip commercial corridors that are trying to get better physically tend to try to get buildings closer and have more of your parking, maybe some parking's in the front, you know, if it's still a suburban environment, but also have rear parking and side parking. So that didn't really resonate that much with the public, but I think we'll still look at that issue in the plan. Okay, so that was just kind of a snapshot of some of the questions. So I want to shift gears, and we're getting really close, Bob.
Who developed the questionnaire?
Yeah, who developed the questionnaire, in case you didn't hear it? We started with a consultant team, and city staff looked at it. I think the steering committee looked at it. I'm trying to, where's Winston or Mary? I can't remember if the steering committee looked at it or if it was more. And us, okay, yeah. So that's on the survey. So I think this is the last thing we're doing before we break up into teams, and that is the draft planning principles. And I'm curious, sometimes I try to avoid reading the whole thing. I've been told by 2 independent experts that my voice can be very tiresome to people. Those experts are my wife and daughter, by the way. So I was hoping I could get by just reading the boldface. Can y'all in the back read all this stuff? Oh, good. Lucky for you. So I'm just going to take my time so you can read it, but I will read the first sentence on each one. Number 1, and there are like 10 principles here, so bear with me. And these are things we came up with early in the process. They've been vetted with the public. We get input. We change them. You know, they get massaged. But it's important because these are the things to think about when we deputize you to be planners in about 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and you go over there and do your planning. So number 1, preserve open space and environmentally sensitive lands. And you can read the rest. I'll kind of go slow here. Okay, number 2, maximize and leverage Tullahoma's existing community assets. And that's things like, you know, the historic downtown and the Jackson Civic Center and so forth. You can museums.
One question before
Yes.
you go on.
Uh-huh.
If number 1 is a high priority.
It's not ordered by priority.
Okay, well, if number 1, excuse me.
Uh-huh.
If number 1 up there is a draft planning principle, one of your principles. What is the city doing as far as stormwater goes? We do not have a full-time stormwater civil engineer. We don't have a stormwater staff to staff what we are currently doing.
Right.
Looking at the information from the city of Tullahoma for last year, there were 4 stormwater inspections done last year for the entire city of Tullahoma. 4.
Okay, so that's very good information, and that's something that you've just put on our radar screen as something to look at. So, and let me back up. I did a poor job of, I didn't really explain why do we do these principles. So let me go back and do that, and that'll put it into perspective for you, I think a little bit better. So the reason we do these, we try to come up with, big, kind of broad ideas based on all the kind of key issues that we're going to address. And we come up with stuff that we think everybody can pretty much buy into. And it's important because when we get into the details like you just talked about, I mean, the real nitty gritty of a plan, it's oftentimes, if you can't decide, do you do this or do that, it's really useful for us to go back and revisit these, take another look at and say, okay, now this was the overall principle. How does this detail in the plan relate to that principle? So you brought up some really specific details, the kind of thing that we probably won't even be able to address in the concept plan, but perhaps or will in the actual plan document. So this is just a principle, right? And also, don't think in terms of what's been going on in the past, right? This is all about the future, and we're just trying to buy into some broad principles, right?
And I'm just talking from a broad area, okay? And from a very broad perspective, okay? Number 1 up there is the biggest problem in the city of Tullahoma right now.
Okay.
The biggest problem.
All right. And then I think I hit number 2 when we went back to 1. So I'll spare you at number 2 again. Number 3, foster safe, vibrant, and walkable neighborhoods offering a high quality of life. So that's all about, walkability, safety, neighborhoods. You can kind of read what's on there. Okay, number 4, create a range of housing opportunities and affordable choices for Tullahoma residents. In other words, not just a bunch of single-family homes on medium to large size lots. More variety, both in the form of housing and the price points. Number 5, Tullahoma's land uses to create pedestrian-friendly places. It sounds weird. Is there like a, huh? There's something missing there. Anyway, I think what we were trying to say, something must have happened in the creation of this, because I know in the part of the plan, the background where we've written it, it's basically saying you should have land uses that create pedestrian-friendly places. That's kind of the bottom line. Is we'll go back and see. But I thought I'd lost my mind when I was trying to read it. Like am I having an aneurysm?
I think the challenge with number 5, basically citywide, especially in the residential areas, is just the lack of sidewalks. Nobody's planned sidewalks in any that I know of.
Right. Well, sidewalks is an issue, but still, you can put all the sidewalks you want, and if you still have land use patterns that encourage driving everywhere because you're segregating land uses and things like that, or it's not a very enjoyable walk or things. So sidewalks is part of the equation, but it's not the total answer. But so this is really more about the places and land uses and so forth. Number 6, promote. Yes, Bob.
Is that going to integrate into the zoning?
Yes, that's something when we present on Monday the place types map that used to be kind of like in the older days land use, but this looks at form and character as well. We'll have areas like that. Not just the downtown. We'll probably, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine there's a good chance we'll identify other parts of town that could be mixed use, but that's just guessing right now. Okay. Number 6, promote high quality development in Tullahoma with a strong sense of place. Number 7, provide ample recreational and cultural amenities for Tullahoma's residents. And the plan will have a whole section just on parks and recreation, by the way. Number 8, provide a variety of transportation alternatives and high-quality transportation corridors within Tullahoma. And when we say, high-quality corridors, we're talking about the development along the, the infrastructure. And then the last 2, 9, expand economic development opportunities in Tullahoma. And number 10, maintain public policies and processes in Tullahoma that are equitable to both residents and developers. We call that throwing the developer a bone, number 10 principle, right? Okay. All right. So the fun part, now to tell you how sad our lives are as planners, this is the most exciting part of any project, the charrette. Right? Particularly tonight, it literally is the most fun, the most dynamic and all that. So we're excited about it, right? Thank gosh. So anyway, here's an overview of what we're going to be doing. Number 1, we're going to split everybody up into teams. And we just said 6 to 8. I don't know how many we'll probably limit it to, we've got 7 tables right now. We'll see. We may ask tables to combine if there's, too many 3 or 4 person teams. But anyway, roughly 6 to 8 per table. Each team is going to have a big base map of the 43. Okay. Let's try to figure that, like how many we should have. Maybe 5, 6, something. Yeah, 5 or 6 will do. So, so each team, you're going to have a base map of the community, and you're going to have a set of colored markers. And each team is going to come up with their plan for Tullahoma. And we're going to give you roughly an hour. We just kind of monitor the teams and see how people are progressing. If people start talking and they're not drawing anymore, whatever, we kind of get the hint like, okay, let's move on. And then we'll reconvene, well, not reconvene, you'll stay at your table and each team will have like 1 or 2 people that present your ideas. And we'll keep it to about 5 minutes each. So again, when you get to the table, this is what your base map looks like. So you can see the white area is within the town limits. We're going to put the team numbers so we keep it all straight, which team number for our own benefit. And there's this blow up. It's an aerial map of the downtown area. So, I mean, if you were proposing things for downtown, it'd be kind of tough to do at that scale. So we've blown up downtown, and it's an aerial map, which you can kind of tell a little bit more what might be going on. You've got the colored markers. You're going to also find this package of a couple little, just 8.5 by 11 maps on existing features. And then there's a legend for the color coding that I'll show you in a second. I guess you saw that before. So what is it that you do with the maps? People are always like, well, do we show things that are existing? Do we propose new stuff? And it's kind of both. If there are existing features that you think are important to point out, maybe because it's like an old building that you got to preserve or something like that, you can point that out. Like this one says, save old building. And by the way, we think it's really important to have notes, like using a black marker or whatever color you want. But just all the notes you can do, because sometimes it's tough, even when we hear you present the plans, there's going to be a lot of presentations, and it makes it easier for us if you write lots of notes when you're making these marks. And then there are also, you want to show new stuff. If you want like new commercial development or housing or a new park or whatever it might be, then you want to show that on the map as well. And as I said, lots of notes. So here's the ground rules. Think outside of the box. And this is your chance to be creative. You don't have to run a fiscal benefit analysis in your mind for every, although Jennifer might like that, but to figure what's going to be viable, what's not. This is a time to kind of think big. And then we can, bring it down to reality when we think about these ideas later. Respect other people's ideas, so don't talk over other people. We hope you will all participate and be active. Don't be afraid to draw. We do not expect you to be artists, right? Just do your best. Doesn't look like we got many masks. Number 6 isn't an issue these days. And then have fun. This is you're not getting paid to do this, but it's valuable for the community, and hopefully you have a good time. So we're going to go over there, and again, just to remind you, and we got one of these sheets at every table, but this kind of color coding, the blue marker, when you're talking about civic things like a museum or something, use the blue marker. Public spaces are green. Businesses like shopping and dining and things would be red. Housing is this kind of yellow color. Transportation is brown. And then other things you can just use a black marker. And there are going to be a lot of things that don't translate onto a map, right, into a graphic, that are something that maybe it's an economic idea. And you just want to write that maybe in the margin of the plan. So anyway, that's it. So go ahead and Winston will guide you to tables, but I'm not going to make people sit at a certain table. You can pick wherever. Yes.
Hey, I'm Brian Hayes, team number 1. Our main focus here is we're big on infrastructure, stormwater mitigation. That's a big thing that we need to take account for the city. Currently, that's lacking in my point of view. We need a better maintenance plan for the city, keeping culverts clean, maintaining things. It's nice to buy nice shiny things, but we need to maintain them. We need to have a maintenance budget. We see the same thing. I used to work out at AEDC. We buy big items, but never maintain them. So we need to have good maintenance plan. It'd be nice to have a full-time municipal civil engineer on staff. That way you have somebody that knows stormwater, environmental, take care and have the city have somebody in charge instead of having consultants on contract for engineering responsibilities. Sidewalks, always a big thing. Sidewalks, especially along Avoca, Kings Lane. I forget, we've got them here. I forget where. Yeah, Cedar Lane right here. So sidewalks are always big. Trying to, kids walking to school, keep them safe. Public exercise. And road widening. There's a lot of narrow roads in Tullahoma. A lot of places where you can go off the shoulder. It's just a little bit of widening of roads, a little extra shoulder room. Enhanced beautification and entrances to Tullahoma. Coming into Tullahoma, you want people to think nicely of your town. So we need to make it look nice when we come into the city. Update City Hall. City Hall looks really ancient. We need to update City Hall. We need to come into the future. Revitalize downtown, that's always a big thing. I love downtowns. Back before COVID, I would travel all over the world, love downtown areas. Tullahoma's getting better downtown, but I think we can get better of getting more restaurants, more things downtown. A big thing, this building we're in right now, let's update our high school. That's where our kids are preparing ourselves. Technical engineers, I'm an electrical engineer. STEM maintenance, STEM centers, things like that. This high school, I went to high school here, and it looks pretty much the same. So it really needs to be updated. It's going to be a big ticket item, but there's plans to do it in phases to maybe make it manageable for the city to budget. Housing, apartments, townhouses. There were times where there was going to be a group of townhouses, condominiums built over there off Kings Lane that disappeared for some reason. But very good land for there to have townhouses in these certain areas. Restrooms at our sports facilities. Johnson Lane, Rogers Complex. My wife is from Franklin, and one of the big things at the soccer fields there, you have all these nice facilities. You can bring in select teams, travel teams, tournament teams, bring those into this town and really generate some buzz. Also at Rogers Field Complex is not even marked on here, but that's where our U10, U12, U13 team plays. There's no lights over there. There's no restroom facilities. The parking is bad. There's also a football field over there that we have to share parking with, and so there's a lot of areas there in the restrooms and concessions and all that. Over here on the William Northern, where that funky intersection is, like to get that straightened out so you can increase retail commercial availability in that area. Let me read one more thing here. The Big Lots store. That was an idea in our group of making that a very nice banquet center or meeting entertainment center. Big facility, don't know what it's going to be used for, but that's a dream to update that into an event center for the town. Also, get this air park developed. Aerospace companies, engineering companies, high-tech companies. Also, Short Springs, very popular area. horrible parking. I live over in that side of town, and on big events, Memorial Day, you know, all the big times, July 4th, they're parking up and down Short Springs Road, which is very dangerous. And you know, and there's no restrooms over there either. So parking and restrooms in that area. I think that is pretty much covered everything. I get it done in 5 minutes?
I think so.
Okay, that's all I got.
All right, team number 2.
I'm Beverly Lee, and I'm going to present a portion that we talked about as far as having a showcase somewhere that when you come here, you would have an event center, you would have all kinds of different opportunities. We are proposing an Arnold Heritage and Innovation Center located on Wagner Park on the South Ball Field. There's been about every Air Force base, every base in the country basically has some sort of innovation entrepreneur center that actually is working with the military, creating products, creating things rapidly, much more different way of doing business than they ever have in the past. So we need an innovation center. But the one thing that's also, that brings in the whole culture of our community is that HAP Arnold Engineering Development Complex. HAP Arnold is the only 5-star general that does not have any library or a museum named after it. We are his home. People can't get access to the base to find out what the base is. Nobody knows what kind of impact we've made on national security, and yet it's been significant, super significant. How do we inspire our children if we don't tell them what we do? Hap Arnold himself was taught to fly at Orville and Wilbur's flying school. What an amazing story the man has on his own. He wrote children's books on flying. He hobnobbed with Hollywood. He delivered the U.S. mail disastrously, but he delivered the U.S. mail, and the military was doing that. There's a great story, many, many stories of him and how he's attached to all the other leaders. We can tell that story. We can tell how Arnold has had an impact on basically every single weapon system that's been in the air. We already have some artifacts to do that. So we propose, talking to the Air Force, to get an enhanced use lease program with this location by Wagner Field, in between where the National Guard is and where the Wagner Park is, to create a heritage trail, to tell the story about Camp Forest, to tell the story about the Japanese internment and the German POW camp. So we could get that all the way to Wattendorf Highway. It's about a mile. So you could create a biking trail and a hiking trail. Right here, there's a railroad, the old railroad that's not used anymore. We could get a Rails to Trails grant to tie all that together, take it to the Hands-On Science Center, make that an entire innovation park, a research and development. This is in the flood zone, so you can't, this area right here, I know is in the flood zone, so you can't build anything but maybe sports complexes or a trail. Over here, the study hasn't been done, but if it's not in the flood zone, then potentially you could build a research and development park, you could build young professional housing, so that if you worked at Arnold, you could live over in this area. The city already has an enhanced use lease for the tennis courts there, so if we need more sporting facilities and stuff, that land is there. We've already been doing that. So that's one big area that would hopefully upgrade the Hands-On Science Center. The National Science Foundation had a webinar the other day I was on, and they used Tennessee as an example to everybody in the nation about innovation. They told about Oak Ridge. They talked about Knoxville. They talked about Chattanooga and automobile. They talked about Nashville with the biotech. They talked about Memphis now with the new Ford facility going in. And then they brought Huntsville into Tennessee. So that was good. So anyway, we're talked about as innovation. Our area, Coffee County, has more DOD dollars than anybody except Shelby County in the state of Tennessee. So we're primed to do this. The Department of Defense has partnership programs we can partner with, as well as the Department of Commerce just gave out 351 grants. 82 of them were to build innovation centers. So it's not just pie in the sky, it's something that could happen. So I'm going to leave it to Jimmy to talk about the other things that we talked about.
Thanks, Beverly. One of the things where she was talking about putting this 25,000 square foot facility is in Wagner Park. And Wagner Park, some of you may know, we think is an old landfill, and it sinks all the time. 2 weeks ago, I was out there at a football game, and they took 20 bags of sand to fill in holes all over the place, and that occurred within a 2-week period of time also. So it's sinking all the time. She's talking about putting it over around where the softball field is, or maybe up in the corner where that pavilion is. But we had been talking about moving those football fields to the St. Paul's area. The St. Paul's is a floodplain. They are not anticipating building there, obviously, because it's a floodplain. So what we were talking about is moving those football fields over there, tie that into the Cascade, the D.W. Wilson, that'll all be a good sporting complex. See if we can get access off of Grundy Street, so it gives us access that way. We have access to the Greenway. We have access to Cascade Fields and everything. We also then would have access from the St. Paul's area too. I would even like to get the old Wilson plant and see if we could incorporate that and start doing indoor facilities, soccer, baseball, softball, and other things that you could do indoor. That would also tie right into that area too, because that Wilson plant's sat empty for, what, 25, 30 years, I don't know, and it's just kind of an eyesore. So we'd like to try to tie all that in together, and that's in this area here. We've talked about over time where the old driving range is. I know that property's been acquired again recently, but that is also in a floodplain, and we talked about putting tennis courts there and tying that to the Tullahoma High School, because the Eli Grove Foundation, what they're trying to do is build a big facility, and they want to put it right there where the existing tennis courts are. So if we had access off Cedar Lane into the high school, you'd be able to go by the tennis courts and have ways in and out of the high school that way too. And then, of course, one of our big things is the fourth field at Johnson Lane. That is a nice complex. I don't know if you've been out there. I hadn't been there in years, and I went out there and I was shocked how beautiful it is and how we don't use it. It's sat empty basically for 15 years, except for recreational softball, girls softball, for a limited period of time. We're trying to bring softball tournaments and baseball tournaments in there. We've changed the base sizes so I can do baseball tournaments there, but I need the fourth field. I'm losing tournaments to Murfreesboro, Franklin, Shelbyville, other places because we don't have that fourth field. And to alleviate parking problems, I'd like to tie the existing softball parking lot to the softball parking lot, so that softball, when they're having their events there, they can use the softball parking lot, and softball can use the soccer parking lot then. To temporarily solve the problem with the bathroom issue, we could put a sidewalk from the soccer parking lot into the Johnson Lane complex. They have a nice facility there with nice bathrooms and stuff that are heated and cooled, I believe. And so that's a way to tie all that together, at least until we can get restrooms over there at Johnson Lane, which is another priority too. We also just identified different areas for housing and stuff on here. We talked about widening Cedar Lane. I know that's been an issue for all my life, pretty much. And of course, one of the big issues is the red light there at Anderson and Highway 55. Highway 55, right there down from the Dairy Queen. It's kind of an eyesore area right there at that red light. We'd like to fix that up somewhere, make that a little bit nicer, see if we can do some kind of zoning where we can build it up and make it a nice area. I think that's about pretty much all we had in our group.
Give you a brief overview of kind of what my group, Team 3, talked about. You know, we kind of just went down the list and kind of we started with blue and talked about some of the civic and institutional facilities that we wanted to see. And our group was fairly passionate about a newer library that we've outgrown our other ones. So going off of, I think it was group 2, I guess, maybe I guess it was group 2. I did not know that General Hap Arnold did not have a library, so that may be a good segue into that. So thank you for that. So yeah, we just kind of basically said that we wanted a new library facility located somewhere centrally located. We didn't have a good place to put it. We actually kind of talked about what was said earlier about the Wilson building might be a good place to start that. There's a lot of development in the Wilson area, in the old Wilson plant area, that could be used for expansion of the parks and other like civic facilities and stuff if the city were to acquire that. So that may be something that we could look into in the future. We talked about there was some talk about basically taking our civic center. We have the little playhouse over there, the South Jackson Civic Center. A lot of us were there this morning for the Veterans Day thing, which was fabulous. Ray, thank you. Anyway, we talked about maybe if we could spruce that up and do something there a little bit more like, you know, there was a lot of talk in the surveys about needing for like a public gathering area for outdoor concerts and facilities, stuff like that. So that may be some renovation in the South Civic Center would be an asset to the city there. And then we also talked about maybe expanded fitness center facilities and stuff like that. I feel like, you know, that our facilities that we have at the D.W. Wilson Community Center, while we have a pretty nice public pool, the other stuff is, you know, could be expanded to something that some of the other communities around us are I think, attracting, you know, people coming in. All right. So let's move on to public spaces, parks, plazas, greenways, and trails. One person in our group had a fabulous idea about creating a kind of a interconnected greenway with some plazas that was kind of maintained by the students of the school and stuff like that, for like just like open green space within our 4 quadrants in our kind of neighborhood schools. So you know, we went and circled all the schools here and said, okay, let's you know, interconnect them with some kind of like, you know, green space area so that they can travel between them, but also have like a kind of a plaza, so where we can, you know, you can have people congregate and stuff in locally. So I like that idea as well. And just for the video, we made reference to Jerry's email that we'll attach with the map. All right, so what else do we have for public spaces? I think that may be it. Businesses. We'll do businesses and housing together. One of the comments from a member of our group was, is that they had an anecdote about someone coming in that was moving into the area, coming up from Franklin County and coming through here and wondering if they had made a grave mistake. Because they saw this kind of like, I guess blight is the word maybe, coming up this way. So, you know, we kind of talked about some focused development of businesses and housing in like the south, on, you know, South Jackson Street would be an asset to the city as well in the 2040 plan. Let's see what else we got here. We talked about anything else? We used the wrong color for businesses too, so we made a note of that. So transportation, this is kind of where we got cut off with time, because we spent a lot of time talking about the library. But essentially, some of our big things is basically just some sidewalks. Cedar Lane needs a sidewalk. We're going to be doing, I think, a lot of development up here in the Ledford Mill area based on just kind of what I've seen coming down the pipe. And we need to make sure that we have smart growth and development for the transportation plan there going forward in the 2040. We kind of highlighted some areas that were lacking in sidewalk and stuff like this. One of the biggest things that I think is a huge misfall that needs to be fixed tomorrow. There is no sidewalk for these people coming from the area of the Civic Center over to Farrah, for the students that are trying to get to school crossing Rock Creek. There is no sidewalk crossing that bridge. I didn't know that until about a year ago, and that is a huge oversight in my opinion. Also, transportation. Probably an unpopular idea, but I think that it would be beneficial to shrink Jackson Street down to 3 lanes so that we can have safe crossing, so that the people that live over in this area can go to Walgreens safely. In my opinion, there is no safe crossing from Grundy Street to Shelbyville. And we need to fix that so that we can have a walkable community. And in general, we've just kind of located some other areas on the map where we thought some sidewalks and stuff would be beneficial. And then other issues, we didn't get to talk about too much of that, but in general, we did discuss some like floodplain issues and stuff about some areas. I know up here where group number 1 was talking about is an issue to talk about as well too. So I think that's all we got. Anything else? Did I miss something?
Transportation.
What?
School.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, we talked about transportation for schools, like a bus system or something like that. I realize that's a hot topic. So, but yes, I missed that. But we get that on the record. All right, thank you.
I don't have any new things I'm going to really share because obviously we're group 4 and a lot of the ground has already been covered. I try to get to know the people in my group because I think that speaks volumes. We had a former city planner on our committee, so I tried to really soak that up. We also had people who moved here, and so I asked them what attracted you to the area. So we had some conversations about that too. But I think the theme here is we have a lot of great places, but they're just not linked. And it seems like every group that's gotten up here, we have great things. We want to add some more things, but we really need to figure out ways to link them together. That's kind of what I'm hearing. So I'll kind of do the same thing group 3 did. So for blue, we said that we would like to capitalize more on Motlow and maybe UTSI. We didn't actually draw that part on here for UTSI because if y'all were like us, all these ideas just started coming out like crazy. So capitalize on that, try to see how we can pull Motlow more into our city, but also have ways to access Motlow out, which that gets into some greenways and bike trails and things like that. But really capitalizing on that. Another conversation had to do with improving the high school and also improving the technology of the high school. I shared that we have improved a lot of that because I think a lot of times if you don't work in it, you don't know what's available here. So I did share that, but I understand the community sees the need for that. And I'm just reporting what my group shared. So the next piece of it, if we go to the green, we all know what that is. We talked about maybe some kind of amphitheater. And I know a lot of the groups have talked about this area with D.W. Wilson, trying to capitalize some on that property that's there. And it looks like on our map, kind of everything kind of comes out from that, the green areas. There was some conversation about improving the area out at like Machine Gun Falls, Short Springs Natural Area, making some restrooms out there. A lot of people access that for the hiking. Let's see. I mentioned the bike trail going out to Motlow, just another way to access that. Another thing we talked about briefly was an inclusive playground for individuals with disabilities. Moving on to the red, we also talked about a new, well, I don't know if we talked about a new library. I think we added it later, but the library was on our list as well. It's dated. There was also conversation about a technology business center out kind of towards Wagner Park. More entertainment options for little kids and big kids. Somebody used the Go USA Fun Park in Murfreesboro as an example because it provides outdoor activities but also the option for kids to come inside. And we don't have any options really for kids to have an indoor option here in Tullahoma. You do have to travel to be able to do that. Let's see. more restaurants downtown, office space, shops. Moving on to housing, one idea that was brought up was to maybe build some more housing out toward Wagner, close to the Hands-On Science Center. The only thing really out there, apartments-wise, is the Forest Park apartments, and they're quite dated. So that was an area that we thought could be improved on there to attract more people to Tullahoma. And of course, with that comes more green areas. We all know that. And then transportation. This was a big part of our conversation in our group. So for transportation, basically it was described, what I took away from the conversation was we really kind of have a wall here in Tullahoma. So we have our railroad tracks and we have Jackson Street. And that kind of smushes everything together. And it puts everything in one combined long path right through here. So you can't really expand that way too much because of the railroad. But then you have all these businesses in the middle. And then we also talked about the trucks and the traffic that come through Tullahoma. One suggestion was a bypass somewhere, somehow, around Jackson Street. Another part of the conversation was getting the trucks off of Jackson Street, maybe have them go a different route. There was also conversation about putting in some medians to slow the traffic down, beautify Jackson Street. Another common theme that aligned with our group was we just need more crossings. We need more safe crossings on Jackson Street. That's a big issue for our community. It always has been. But maybe another underpass or another overpass, something safe for people to cross the railroad tracks. I know the streets, but anyway, there's a long amount of space. I think somebody said 2 miles where you can't even cross from one part of town to the next. And so that's inconvenient. You know, if you're trying to access a shop on this side of Jackson Street and you're coming from Robert E. Lee or East Middle, it's inconvenient. So that was another issue that we discussed. There really needs to be some kind of safe crossing from Tullahoma High School to the other side of the street for obvious reasons. Convenience, but also safety. That's a good central location to put something like that, just right here outside of the high school. Another thing that was discussed was we have all these trucks coming through Tullahoma, but we don't capitalize on that. So Tyson, their trucks come through. Trucks from the distillery come through, and I'm sure there's tons of others, but Tullahoma, to my knowledge, gets nothing for the trucks coming through. So is there a way we could capitalize on that, partner with one of those companies? I don't know. I don't know. Is there anything else? Anybody in my group?
What was your idea about beautification of the circle at the airport?
Oh, I don't know if that was my idea. Anyway, we know our airport's a big deal. So, you know, we've had some discussion about some development out here, and I think I had some people that represent the airport maybe in our group, and they just want to make sure that that's not encroached on by development, first of all. But also, where is that spot?
Is that green part?
Okay, right here, right? So there's this spot if you come out from like Kentucky Fried Chicken and Ascend Federal Credit Union, and it's just kind of random. There's just this space there. So we were wondering if you could come out from the airport and just make that a straight shot and get rid of whatever the open space is. That's just a beautification thing. So anyway, that was our group.
So, unlike other groups, we didn't write in marker so boldly, so you'll have to hear my words and not see so much what I've written here. So my group, we had a heavy focus in downtown Tullahoma, as I had Mark and Florence and myself from the bird's eye view of the Chamber of Commerce. So a lot of our conversation is focused downtown. Our group really honed in on the fact that through what we heard this evening and through what we know with our boots on the ground, that growing downtown and revitalizing downtown is our main focus. And so we focus much of our conversation on First of all, identifying that we do understand that downtown we've got this not a square situation. We like the idea of expanding it beyond just what people consider the original downtown, utilizing the map from historical Tullahoma, using our historical area churches, as well as downtown and older retail entities, utilizing the spaces that are concentrated from the Civic Center through the city of Tullahoma's, the Passanoo, excuse me, I'm sorry, making use of downtown all the way down North Jackson, making it more of a rectangle approach, and then thinking in terms of all the access points from each direction, from Shelbyville to Lynchburg, from Highway 55 to Manchester, and in from the lake, and identifying that space as not just drivable but walkable. And when we think in terms of the beauty of that area, unifying from each of those sections, utilizing signage, utilizing landscape, and utilizing that the idea that the history of Tullahoma, and not just the future but the past, using that footprint that we have in that area. And so through that network, we wanted to focus on a lot of the alleyways, not just the ones that are behind the downtown businesses, but the ones that are throughout area residences, making them including paving, resurfacing them, making more suitable for biking, walking, and driving, and utilizing some of those alleys, specifically the one between Memories Antiques and Agape. I'm not sure if it's a Christian center, but it's a center where people gather. Utilizing that space where people would feel like it's a place for people to gather, utilizing lighting. We've got a lot of great art that has been put up, many murals in the area, connecting that footprint and identifying that art center with South Jackson, and also creating a crosswalk that connects South Jackson and the Tullahoma Art Center so that people would be able to walk safely and connect at that center of the Arts District. The next thing we have is we have identified a few key areas that would be of interest for that public meeting space of 300 or more. We felt like two areas that we'd identified were the building where Tullahoma Industries is currently located. We're specifically interested in the fact that it has office space, but also the potential for retail, with Grady Mack having had a retail location in there in the past. And then, of course, the antique store that is attached to FMO. We'd identified that it would have a lot of work that would need to be done, but the walkability to that area, to downtown. Of course, we're very keen on keeping the 300 more meeting spaces close to downtown as possible, to utilize all the parking that is in the area, understanding that the people of the future won't feel so much like we all do now that walking is such a problem. With this additional 20 to 30,000 people that we would attract in the future, they would hold the mindset that walking is a great thing. Next, we have our railroad depot. So we understand that in the future, the railroad will become more and more important. With Amtrak looking at our area, we'd identified that if we're talking about making it beautiful and walkable throughout the community coming in from each of these areas, it's equally important as creating the center of town with that beautifying and creating some additional public park spaces in that central area, in the what we would consider the Arts District, in that rectangle that we've identified in the center here. Let's see. Florence, I know that you had one idea that I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss.
When we talked about down in the old plaza, the old food line and all that area, how that could be really incorporated into maybe some townhouses that would be going to the project. You know, there's so much that's connected right there to the Greenway. We talked about that little kind of junk store across from Marty's down a little bit, and the apartments up above. That could be such a cool little apartment house. You know what I'm talking about? West Lincoln.
At the end of West Lincoln, across from the Food Line area, we felt like really capitalizing down that section of West Lincoln would be an area to really focus on, as it creates that access point on the way out to the lake. If we really focused in on the down West Lincoln and also down both sides of South Jackson in that that area.
And then we talked about how important we got this airport, flying and all, and why we haven't been having that. We should have that day on the calendar every year. And anything you do, whether you're business or civic, whatever, is called Flying Week. And everything we do, I get lots of customers that come in that week and come and buy shoes. So I mean, I think we would really be, we used to have things available for them to do, but we need to try to get back on that. You know, we're looking for something to be the biggest buttercups or the biggest whatever, but really we already have it.
Yeah. So the greatest focus that our group identified was that we have a great frame of reference from the past. We really want to make use of what we've already identified as our historical areas and really grow that in relation to the arts and the beautification and really honing in on the access points from all of the places that Liesl you identified when you talked about your driving studies, the folks that are driving in and driving out, that being our primary focus on what we see as being beautiful, accessible, and the focus point on where things should be gravitating toward. Thank you.
I'm glad to make this report. Before I even get into the infrastructure, from a government and from Tullahoma standpoint, things that are non-physicals, government services that we do pretty well here that we need to continue to stay focused on: public safety, education, quality water, utilities, high broadband service. I know Brian, is Brian left yet? He's about to get out of here. But I mean, whatever TUA does, those are vitally important for Tullahoma, because it will affect everything we even think about here. So if we lose safety and government services and education. Maureen was very focused on downtown. Some of the things that's already been focused on the downtown area between the railroad tracks and Jackson Street in making that business friendly. She would love to have a green plaza in there, which we discussed was almost economically unfeasible unless you're going to wipe out a bunch of private sector businesses in there. So, but that's what you would love to have. We talked about certainly the expansion of the Greenway from the airport all the way to South Jackson. I certainly talked about the need for some type of community event center, and I thought building one adjacent, tied in to South Jackson might make a lot of sense. And as far as downtown, you know, for the events at South Jackson, and this is kind of a city service, and I always think about Jack Daniels when they have their shuttle from their parking lot to their tour. I mean, it's not a big investment to have a tram service, trolley service that would just be utilized when there's an event at South Jackson to tie in South Jackson down to the restaurants and places in downtown, and just make that operational during those types of events. So she certainly wanted to expand the tennis center out at the base there. One idea that has come up, and I certainly, wherever Beverly left yet, she's still back there. Tullahoma really does need to focus on its identity. That Hap Arnold Center coming in on 55 could be a very great focal point as an identity for Tullahoma's identity. And so I'm going to give her a double shout out for that, for working on that. So that's it. I'll stop there.
Really appreciate everybody's input. I think we've heard a lot of themes that are kind of recurring. We're hearing things like, improving Jackson Street, revitalizing downtown, creating a greenway system and all the connections we can make to parks and so forth. Leveraging the airport more. Just a lot of ideas, a lot of things that I think are common ideas. How about the idea, we've heard about housing, different types of housing. You need more housing, downtown revitalization. Maybe downtown housing might become the key theme because you kind of, knock off two birds with one stone. So, but a lot of good stuff, and we really appreciate your time. This is so important to us. We use all these ideas we hear to kind of as a launching pad for us now to spend the next 4 days coming up with the concept plan. And remember, it's going to be here at the high school. It's going to be in the auditorium, Monday, 5:30. And please, I hope all of y'all can come. Hopefully you'll see your thumbprint somewhere on that plan. And invite friends, relatives, please spread the word, because we need to get as many people out as we can, because when we present the plan, we're going to have a whole lot of time after the presentation to get your input, see what you like, what don't you like, and then of course we go away based on that and put the plan document together. So again, thank you for being here. This is great stuff, and we're going to get you out for good behavior 20 minutes early from advertising.